There's an ancient idea, born in China more than 2,000 years ago, that says something profoundly simple and at the same time unsettling. The universe works better when you stop trying to control it. This idea crossed centuries, empires, wars, and countless human transformations. It survived time not because it promised comfort, but because it revealed something uncomfortable, something true. This idea is recorded in a small book of only 81 verses, yet its influence echoes to this day in philosophy, spirituality, and even in the way modern life understands success, effort, and control. This idea is called Tao, and the man to whom it is attributed became known as Lao-Tzu, the old master. Lao-Tzu is believed to have lived between the 6th and 4th centuries before Christ, during the Zhou dynasty. His existence is surrounded by mystery. To some, he was a historical sage. To others, a symbolic figure. But regardless of who he was, his legacy is undeniable. He is traditionally credited as the author of the Tao Te Ching, also known as the De De Jing, the foundational text of Taoism. The name of the book already reveals its essence. Tao means the way. Te means virtue or integrity. Qing means classic. Together, it can be understood as the classic of the way and virtue. But the Tao is not a common path. It is not a road, nor a doctrine, nor a system of rules. The Tao is the essential and invisible process through which all things exist. In the text itself, the Tao is described like this: silent and boundless, standing alone, unchanging, yet permeating everything without exception. It can be regarded as the mother of the world. I do not know its name. I call it Tao. The Tao cannot be named, defined, or contained within concepts. And yet, everything arises from it. Everything returns to it. To live in harmony with the Tao, according to Lao-Tzu, is the foundation of a well-lived life. Among the many reflections found in the Tao Te Ching, one in particular cuts through time with unsettling clarity. Only when we are fed up with our illness will we cease to be ill. This sentence does not speak only of physical disease. It speaks of addictions, of procrastination, of stagnation, of dysfunctional relationships, of identities built around failure. It speaks of that moment when suffering stops being abstract and becomes unbearable, when it is no longer possible to pretend that everything is fine. Perhaps that is why the sentence feels as if it is speaking directly to you, just as it speaks to me. The name Lao-Tzu literally means old master. It is a title, not a personal name, a name that suggests wisdom earned through time, through observation, through silence rather than proclamation. According to tradition, Lao-Tzu lived during the later years of the Zhou dynasty, a period marked by political instability, social decay, and the collapse of long-standing moral structures. It was a time when rulers sought control, laws multiplied, and force replaced harmony. Lao-Tzu is said to have served as an archivist in the imperial library, a guardian of ancient texts, a man surrounded by knowledge, yet increasingly distant from ambition and power. Legend tells that, disillusioned with the state of the world, Lao-Tzu chose to leave society behind. He turned his back on the court, on authority, and on recognition as he prepared to depart, crossing the western border into obscurity. A gatekeeper recognized him and asked for a final gift, a record of his understanding. Lao-Tzu agreed. He wrote a short text, no more than 81 brief verses, and then disappeared. That text became known as the Tao Te Ching. Unlike other philosophical works of its time, the Tao Te Ching does not argue. It does not persuade. It does not command. Instead, it speaks in paradox. It whispers rather than explains. It points instead of defines. Lao-Tzu did not seek followers. He did not establish a school. He did not claim authority. What he offered was not answers, but a way of seeing, a way of aligning life. with something deeper than rules, stronger than force, and quieter than ambition. In a world obsessed with doing more, Lao-Tzu asked a different question. What happens when we do less, but with greater awareness? The text Lao-Tzu left behind became known as the Tao Te Ching, a small book in size, yet vast in implication. At its core, the Tao Te Ching is not a manual, not a doctrine, and not a moral code. It is a meditation on existence itself. The title reveals more than it seems. Tao means the way, but not a way you follow outwardly. It is a way things unfold naturally, the rhythm behind change, the order that exists without being imposed. Te is often translated as virtue, but not in the moralistic sense. It refers to integrity, to alignment, to living in accordance with one's nature and with the nature of the world. Qing means classic, a text preserved not because it commands obedience, but because it reflects something timeless. Together, the Tao Te Ching can be understood as the classic of the way in integrity, yet the Tao itself resists definition. The moment we try to explain it, we move away from it. Language divides. The Tao unites. That is why the Tao Te Ching begins with a warning. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. This is not an invitation to ignorance. It is an invitation to humility. The Tao is not an object among other objects. It is the process by which all objects arise, change, and eventually dissolve. It is present in growth and decay, in birth and death, in movement and stillness. Nothing exists outside the Tao, and yet the Tao itself remains untouched. To understand the Tao is not to grasp it intellectually. It is to recognize it in the way water flows, in the way seasons change, and in the way life corrects itself. When interference stops, the Tao does not demand belief. It does not ask to be worshipped. It asks only to be observed. Rather than explaining the Tao through logic, the Tao Te Ching allows the Tao to speak for itself. It does not define. It describes. It gestures towards something that can be felt but never fully captured. In one of its passages, the Tao is described like this: silent and boundless, standing alone, unchanging, yet permeating everything without exception. It can be regarded as the mother of the world. I do not know its name. I call it Tao. These lines do not attempt clarity. They invite stillness. The Tao is silent, not because it is absent, but because it does not compete for attention. It is boundless, not because it expands endlessly, but because it is not confined by form. It stands alone, yet leaves nothing untouched. This paradox sits at the heart of Taoist thought. The Tao does nothing, and nothing is left undone. It does not intervene, yet it gives rise to all movement. It does not assert itself, yet everything follows its pattern. This is why the Tao is called the mother of the world, not a ruler, not a judge, but a source that does not demand recognition, a source that does not impose direction, a source that allows all things to become what they are. To encounter the Tao is not to acquire new knowledge. It is to unlearn the habit of constant interference, to recognize that beneath effort, beneath ambition, beneath control, there is already an order at work, an order that does not need permission, an order that does not need approval, an order that simply is. According to Lao-Tzu, to live in harmony with the Tao is not about achieving perfection. It is about reducing resistance. A well-lived life in Taoist thought is not one without pain, but one without unnecessary struggle. Much of human suffering does not come from what happens to us. It comes from our refusal to accept what is already happening. We resist change. We resist uncertainty. We resist the present moment. When it does not match our expectations, the mind replays the past. It rehearses imagined futures. It builds narratives about who we should already be, what we should have accomplished, and how things should have turned out. Slowly, almost without noticing. Life stops being something we inhabit and becomes something we endure. Lao-Tzu observed this pattern long before modern psychology. He saw that the human mind has a tendency to overreach. Instead of serving life, it tries to dominate it. Instead of responding to reality, it attempts to control it. This constant effort creates tension. Tension in the body, tension in relationships, tension in the sense of self. Living in harmony with the Tao does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means learning when not to interfere. It means recognizing that not every problem requires force, and not every discomfort demands immediate correction. Sometimes, clarity arises not from action, but from stillness. Sometimes, the most intelligent response is to pause and allow the situation to reveal its own direction. This is not passivity. It is attentiveness. It is the ability to remain present without rushing to impose meaning or outcome. To live with the Tao is to trust that life, when not constantly obstructed, tends toward balance on its own. And that balance, once allowed to emerge, often knows better than we do where to go next. At the center of Lao-Tzu's philosophy lies a concept that challenges almost everything modern culture teaches us. This concept is called Wu-Wei. Wu-Wei is often translated as non-action or effortless action, but these translations can be misleading. Wu-Wei does not mean doing nothing. It does not mean withdrawal, laziness, or escape from responsibility. Wu-Wei means acting without artificial intention. It is action that does not come from fear, action that does not come from anxiety, action that does not come from the need to control outcomes. The Tao Te Ching expresses this paradox clearly. The way is a constant non-action, yet nothing is left undone. Wu-Wei is the kind of action that arises from inner stillness. When the human being abandons the compulsive urge to force solutions, to anticipate every consequence, and to impose direction on life, something unexpected happens. The correct action emerges naturally, not because it was calculated, but because resistance has fallen away. Wu-Wei is not about passivity. It is about alignment, eating when it is time to eat, working when it is time to work, stopping when it is time to stop. In this way, action becomes precise rather than frantic. Movement becomes efficient rather than exhausting. Wu-Wei removes friction from effort. There is still discipline. There is still responsibility. There is still engagement with the world. But these actions are no longer fueled by panic or the need to prove worth. A person who practices Wu-Wei does not rush to impose themselves on reality. They respond rather than react. They move when movement is necessary. They remain still when movement would only create noise. This is why Wu-Wei often feels uncomfortable at first. It asks for trust, precisely where the mind demands control. Wu-Wei becomes clearer when we stop treating it as an idea and begin to observe it in daily life. It appears in small, ordinary moments, moments that usually pass unnoticed. A conversation where listening changes the outcome more than speaking ever could. A problem that resolves itself once we stop forcing a solution. A decision that becomes obvious only after we stop overthinking it. Wu-Wei teaches that not every situation requires immediate action. Some require space. Some require patience. Some require silence. This does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means understanding timing. Acting too soon can create as much damage as acting too late. Wu-Wei is sensitivity to the moment. It is knowing when effort will help and when it will interfere. In modern life, this often feels counterintuitive. We are rewarded for speed, for productivity, for constant motion. Stillness is often mistaken for weakness. Pauses are seen as inefficiency. Wu-Wei challenges this belief. It suggests that clarity does not always come from doing more, but from doing less with greater awareness. When action arises from calm attention, it tends to be simpler, more direct, more effective. Wu Wei does not remove obstacles. It removes unnecessary struggle. The person aligned with Wu Wei does not exhaust themselves fighting reality. They move with it. And by moving with life, instead of against it, they conserve energy, maintain balance, and allow the natural intelligence of situations to guide their response. In Taoist thought, nature is not something to be conquered. It is something to be observed. Nature does not hurry. It does not force results. It does not compete. And yet, everything unfolds in its time. Seasons change without consultation. Rivers flow without effort. Trees grow without instruction. For Lao-Tzu, nature is the clearest expression of the Tao. It shows how life functions when it is not constantly interrupted by excess intention. A seed does not pull itself out of ground. Water does not argue with gravity. The sun does not rush to rise earlier. Each follows its own rhythm. Each fulfills its role without self-consciousness. Human beings, however, often attempt to step outside this rhythm. We rush what needs time. We cling to what needs release. We resist what needs acceptance. The Tao Te Ching reminds us that imbalance arises when we forget our place within nature and attempt to stand above it. To live according to the Tao is not to reject civilization or progress. It is to remain aligned with the deeper patterns that govern life itself. This perspective deeply influenced not only Taoism, but also Buddhism, Confucianism, and many spiritual traditions throughout history. Each, in its own way, reflects the same insight that harmony emerges when human action respects the natural order instead of attempting to dominate it. Nature does not teach through words. It teaches through presence, through repetition, through quiet persistence. And those who learn to observe it often rediscover something forgotten. That life does not require constant correction to move in the right direction. Another fundamental principle in Taoist philosophy is the concept of yin and yang. Yin and yang are not enemies. They are not opposites locked in conflict. They are complementary forces that exist together in all things. Yin represents what is receptive, dark, quiet, and inward. Yang represents what is active, bright, expansive, and outward. Neither is superior. Neither is complete on its own. Day turns into night. Movement gives way to rest. Expansion is followed by contraction. This rhythm is not accidental. It is the natural flow of existence. When yin and yang are balanced, energy moves freely. Life feels coherent. Effort feels proportional. When this balance is disrupted, tension appears. In the body, in emotions, in thought, excess yang becomes aggression, burnout, and constant striving. Excess yin becomes stagnation, withdrawal, and disconnection. The Tao does not eliminate either force. It harmonizes them. Balance does not mean stillness. It means adaptability. Just as nature shifts between seasons, a human life must shift between effort and rest, expression and silence, engagement and withdrawal. Yin and yang remind us that health, physical, emotional, and spiritual, is not found in extremes, but in relationship, a living balance, constantly adjusting, constantly responding, without force. Within Taoism, the idea of divinity does not function in the same way as in Western theistic religions. The focus is not placed on worshiping isolated gods or obeying a supreme authority. Instead, the emphasis is on understanding the principles that organize the cosmos. Divine figures in Taoism do not exist apart from the Tao. They are expressions of it. They represent stages, functions, and movements within the same universal process. Rather than commanding devotion, they illustrate how the Tao unfolds from the invisible into form, structure, and human experience. In this context emerge the figures known as the Three Pure Ones, They are not separate gods competing for power. They are different manifestations of a single reality seen from different levels of existence. Each represents a phase in the movement of the Tao, its origin, its transmission, and its realization within the human world. Understanding these figures is not about belief. It is about perspective. They offer symbolic language for processes that are otherwise difficult to grasp. Through them, the Taoist tradition communicates how the formless becomes form, how chaos becomes order, and how cosmic principles become lived experience. They are not meant to be worshipped as external powers, but contemplated as reflections of the same forces operating within all things. The first of the three pure ones is known as the primordial Lord of Heaven. This figure represents the Tao before form, before distinction, before opposites. It is associated with a state called Wu Ji, the absolute void. Wu Ji is not emptiness in the sense of absence. It is emptiness as potential, a state in which nothing is yet defined, and therefore everything is possible. There is no yin, there is no yang, no separation between subject and object, only undifferentiated unity. In this state, nothing needs to act, nothing needs to move, nothing needs to become. And yet, within this stillness, all movement is contained. The primordial Lord of Heaven symbolizes this original condition of existence, not as a personal God, but as a metaphysical principle. It points to a reality that exists prior to time, prior to identity, and prior to form. From this undivided state, all differentiation eventually arises. Wu Ji gives way to polarity. Polarity gives rise to movement. Movement gives rise to the world. Understanding Wu Ji is not about imagining a place. It is about recognizing the silent background against which all experience appears. It is the stillness that makes movement visible, the silence that allows sound to exist. The primordial Lord of Heaven is a reminder that before striving, before effort, before identity, there's a deeper ground that remains untouched, and it is from this ground that the Tao unfolds. Many cultures tell stories about the origin of the world. These stories are not meant to describe events literally, but to express principles that are difficult to explain through logic alone. In ancient Chinese mythology, the creation of a universe is described through the story of Pangu. At the beginning, there was only a vast primordial chaos, a formless, undifferentiated state, similar to an enormous cosmic egg. Within this chaos, Pangu came into being. After 18,000 years, he awakened, and with a single act, he separated the heavy from the light, the dark from the bright, the yin from the yang. The lighter, purer elements rose and became the sky. The heavier, denser elements sank and became the earth. To prevent them from collapsing back into chaos, Pangu stood between them, holding sky and earth apart. Each day, the sky rose higher, the earth grew thicker, and Pangu grew taller. This continued for thousands of years, until the separation was complete and stability was achieved. When Pangu's task was finished, he did not rule the world. He did not remain as a god. He dissolved into creation itself. His breath became the wind. His voice became thunder. His eyes became the sun and the moon. His blood formed rivers. His body became mountains and land. From his transformation, the world emerged. This myth reflects a core Taoist insight. Creation is not an act of domination, but of transformation. Nothing is created from nothing. Everything emerges from what already exists. The story of Pangu expresses the same movement described in Taoist philosophy. Unity gives rise to duality. Duality gives rise to form, and form returns to unity. Rather than opposing the Tao, creation unfolds through it, naturally, without force. The second of the three pure ones is known as the celestial lord of the numinous treasure. This figure represents the moment when primordial chaos begins to organize itself, where the primordial lord of heaven symbolizes pure potential. The celestial lord of the numinous treasure symbolizes structure, law, and transformation. It is the Tao, expressing itself through patterns, through teachings, through principles that guide both the cosmos and human life. In Taoist tradition, this stage is associated with the idea of transformation, change that does not destroy balance, but refines it. This is where the symbolism of the famous transformations appears. The traditions speak of 36 celestial transformations and 72 earthly transformations. These are not merely magical powers. They are metaphors. They represent adaptability, flexibility, the capacity to respond to changing conditions without losing one center. In classical Taoist imagery, the wise person is not rigid. They do not cling to form. They do not resist change. Like water, they take the shape of the situation. They move around obstacles instead of confronting them head-on. The celestial lord of the numinous treasure embodies this intelligence of adaptation, an intelligence that understands that survival and harmony depend not on strength alone, but on responsiveness. To follow this aspect of the Tao is to cultivate inner transformation, not by force, but by refinement, by allowing outdated patterns to dissolve naturally and letting new forms emerge when the time is right. This stage of the Tao teaches that change is not something to fear. It is something to learn from. The third of the three pure ones is known as the celestial lord of the Tao and its virtue. This manifestation represents the Tao as it becomes accessible within the human world. Here, the way is no longer only cosmic or abstract. It becomes livable. It becomes practical. For this reason, this aspect of the Tao is traditionally associated with Lao-Tzu himself. Through this manifestation, the Tao descends into human language, human ethics, and human experience. It is no longer only the origin of the universe, nor merely the principle of transformation, but the guidance for how a human being may live in harmony with the world. The celestial lore of the Tao and its virtue embodies the idea that wisdom does not belong only to the heavens. It can be practiced in daily life, in the way one speaks, in the way one listens, in the way one acts, and refrains from acting. At this level, the Tao is not a concept to be studied endlessly. It is a presence to be cultivated. To live according to the Tao is not to escape society, but to move through it without losing alignment. It is to act without aggression, to influence without domination, to lead without coercion. This is the virtue of the Tao, not imposed morality, but natural integrity, an integrity that arises when a person no longer fights reality, but learns to move with it. In this sense, the celestial lore of the Tao and its virtue does not represent a distant deity. It represents the Tao lived here and now. Below these more abstract expressions of the Tao, Taoist tradition also describes a structured order within the cosmos. This order is not rigid. It is symbolic. It reflects the idea that harmony arises when each force fulfills its function without excess. Within this framework appears the figure known as the Jade Emperor. The Jade Emperor represents order, balance, and responsibility within the celestial realm. He is not the source of the Tao. He does not stand above it. Instead, he embodies the administration of harmony, the organization of forces. Once the world has taken form, alongside this principle of order, stand the mother of the Jasper Lake. She represents the feminine aspect of the Tao in its highest expression, associated with nourishment, transformation, and the cycles of life. She governs birth, renewal, and the cultivation of balance between yin and yang. through these symbolic figures. Taoism expresses a simple truth. The universe functions through relationship, not domination. Finally, there is Zhang Daoling. Unlike the cosmic figures, Zhang Daoling represents the Tao as an organized human tradition. Through him, Taoism became a lived practice with communities, rituals, and lineages passed from generation to generation. His role was not to invent the Tao, but to preserve it, to transmit it, and to make it accessible to ordinary people. Through this continuity, the Tao remains a living tradition, not frozen in texts, but embodied in practice. In the end, everything returns to the same point. The Tao does not demand belief. It does not ask for conversion. It does not promise control, salvation, or certainty. It does not position itself above other paths. It does not seek to replace them. Instead, the Tao invites listening. Listening before acting. Listening before judging. Listening before trying to change what is already unfolding. It offers a way of understanding that is neither rigid nor absolute, but attentive, responsive, and grounded in experience. The Tao does not separate the human from the world, nor the world from the sacred. It reminds us that harmony does not arise from domination, but from alignment. That wisdom is not always found in accumulation, but often in restraint. That clarity does not always come from effort, but from stillness. To engage with Taoist thought is not to adopt a belief system, but to approach life with humility, patience, and respect for natural order. This philosophy has been preserved for centuries, not because it claims superiority, but because it continues to speak to the human condition across cultures and time. In the quiet space, between one action and the next, between intention and response, between effort and release, the way reveals itself, not as something to be possessed, but as something to be lived.